Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment, guys. You know, this is my favorite places, at least one of them, is to welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive. Time. What a precious commodity that has been offered to every man, every woman on this planet, 24 hours. Now, how you respect her and honor her is going to tell me a lot about you. If you understand the power and the synchronicity of her, you're going to marry her. You're going to want to hold on to her because she's going to teach you about valuing relationships, how to develop powerful relationships, and many other things. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator, man. It has created the individual that is before us. Why? Because it has deposited a couple of things within that individual's being, and we want to have access to it. What are those things? Wisdom, knowledge, insights, foresights, all of these different sights, if you will. And we want to get in there and extract it because why? We want to become better human spirits while we are here on this planet. And so I want to thank you, Dr. Pete, for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. I'm actually looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Hey, Ken, it's great to be here.
Thank you for coming, man. One of the first questions that I ask an individual once they show up is to crystallize their assignment. I always tell people we all have our little assignments that we have here on this planet, and we afford that opportunity, and we put it in a format, I think, that will be able to pull that out of the individual. And the question is, how do you serve mankind?
You know, service is such a beautiful thing, and service is something that, as a psychologist, I see is inherent in the identity and in the training. I don't know that every psychologist would say that, but it links directly to my work in multicultural psychology as well as social justice. And so the service is, bridging psychological science with spirituality. You know, spirituality can both, the practice of Zen and the practice of mindfulness teaches us that everything is middle path, that there's really nothing that's black and white. And so spirituality is both completely rewarding and at times damaging. And I think the service of trying to heal along this like life of journey kind of exploration is one that's really, beautiful, and one that I feel blessed and privileged to be able to kind of co-pilot some people.
Yeah, I tell people as you become more knowledgeable about the subject, you become more ignorant.
Yes.
You realize that you really, really haven't even touched anything yet, even though you think you have accumulated all this knowledge. One of the customs that we do here at Threads of Enlightenment is to revisit some of those spaces. I tell people that we live there for a few years. The first space that we reside is called the family. That's what we're told. And we have a couple of individuals that are within that grouping. We have the mom and dad. And we mentioned earlier that mom and dad, everyone has some trauma based on their past position in life and so forth. And so they have certain perspective that they're going to now, they have formed their belief in all of these things, and they're going to deposit data into this young individual that they just brought home from the hospital that is now a part of this family. What was your family unit like?
Yeah, and I love that you set it up that way. And I'm going to push us to even be more provocative and lean in and say that not everybody has a mother and father. They may only have one parent, or they might have two fathers, two mothers. There's lots of different, lots of different structures. And so I grew up with a mother and a father and two brothers, and I'm the youngest. And my parents were married for 20 years and then divorced. When I was in elementary school, primary school. So that's something that happens. I mean, more than 50% of relationships end in divorce. And so I was a product of one of those, and both parents are, remarried. And so we have an extended family. So it's sort of the nuclear family is not what it used to be.
Yeah. And as a young one in that situation, because a divorce, separation, if you will, the death of an identity can be a traumatic situation. How did a young individual within that comes a separation of the foundation, if you will, a shaking of one's foundation. How did it affect this young individual?
Yeah, one of the things with clients I work with is sometimes we'll look for the why. In the practice of Zen, you really sort of
Mhm.
let go of the question why. Things just are. And I really,
Mhm.
had a pretty sort of boring upbringing in many ways. I mean, I was also really privileged in other ways, but I don't. There were some problematic behaviors in primary school or something where I get in trouble here and there. And that could have been the consequence of, the family dysfunction, but it also could have just been, normal adolescent development, it could have been just other identity development things. So I really think of things on a developmental
Yeah.
spectrum, and don't try and look for the why. I think the young me was doing a lot of things, the young me was, and it wasn't direct, there's this sort of ether that we're all in. And so there's lots of pieces that impact how we behave or what's traumatic or how we feel. And I think that overall, I'm very blessed and privileged to have had, grandparents, parents, and just lots of love.
Yeah, yeah. That is always an important ingredient to have within a family, love, because it
Yes.
helps anchor us in many ways. As you're growing up, Doc, and you're heading into college, I always like to ask this question because I find that there's always a genesis, there's a story behind it, and I love extracting that. When you're looking to college and so forth, why did you pick the field that you picked?
Well, when I went into college, I studied biology. And so one would think that that's not related to what I'm doing today, but I can explain that it is.
It
They
is.
say we have 7 careers in a lifetime. And I think just anecdotally, most people don't do what they study,
Mm-hmm.
especially in America, because you just
Right.
sort of, it's just what you,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just what you do. You go get a degree and then you move on and you do your thing. So I thought I wanted to go into medicine. So I've always wanted to be in the helping profession, which is why I started with
Mm-hmm.
biology. I chose a school that was close to New York because I had started like a career in media and modeling during high school.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be close to continue to do that while also competing at the highest level in swimming. So I've always been
Yeah.
this sort of high achiever, and all those variables factored into my decision to attend Seton Hall University. As I graduated and then went into graduate school, I still stayed in biology. I studied neuroscience first. And then it wasn't until after that I decided to go into psychology. Certainly in life, there are no straight roads.
I always tell people that, and I try to encourage them, and I tell them everything that you do will be used.
Yes.
Nothing that you do will not be used. And I try to do that, doctor, because I've talked to some people and they're like, "Oh, I'm this, I'm that." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. Back up. Everything where you're at
Mhm.
right now, you think it's not important, but you will see one day the
Yeah.
importance of where you are. Learn everything that you can, learn processes, learn feelings, learn everything you can while you're here. One of the things that you have been consistently saying, and I want to back up a little, Doc, to see if you can identify where did you get that feeling of wanting to help, to be a servant, if you will. Because from our conversation, beginning of our conversation, you talked about this desire to serve. Where did you find that? Where did you
Yeah.
pick it up?
I think that's in the psychological literature, we look at a vocation, versus a career. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
vocation is usually more of a calling. And I think that's just inherent in someone's DNA, let's call it. And,
Yeah.
if there's any listeners that believe in past lives, I think that's probably where it started. And
Yeah.
I still in my own Zen journey am trying to figure all of that out, and just make sense of it in this intellectual way. But really, this is not meant to be
Mm-hmm.
intellectual. So I think it's just been something that's there for me.
Yeah, I think some of our achievements are intellectual, if you will, but then there's a great part of this entire existence here on this planet where in religion they call it the walk of faith.
Yeah,
And you
that's
just
right.
have to surrender and realize that I have to allow it to become, Doc. And I always tell people, love that become, because it's such a powerful expression of everything. So here you are, you picked the
Yeah.
field, and I love neuroscience and all that stuff, because being in that space, you begin to learn some stuff. What did you begin to learn when you're looking at, first of all, let's go to the biology part of it, about the human body, the human molecular system. because everything comes back down to this mind, the neuroscience, and to that biology part of the body, because we have to learn how to utilize all of that in our manifestation, if you will, in manifesting things. Talk to us as to what did you begin to notice as a student of those two important areas in the human existence?
I noticed that I wanted to be more with the connection, and not so much the intellect of it. I mean, it's really, it can be overwhelming stuff to study. I mean, even, you mentioned like molecular, it sort of brings me back to like studying, not, I was teaching actually anatomy and physiology and the whole like nervous system and learning all the nerves and
Yeah.
it's really helpful as a foundation today because I do some research around functional MRIs and looking at how the brain responds to say concussion, for example, and trying to blend the mindfulness meditation Zen stuff with that. Like, can we kind of exercise the brain to get as healthy as possible and to recover and strengthen? So there's like and what I'll say is like we don't know much about it, so even though it's
Yeah.
like sounds cool to study it. We've been doing lots of other types of surgeries for, over 100 years compared to like just imaging the brain for the last 25. I think there's going to be so much more to learn in the next 25.
Yeah, now you guys, like you said, it's only been that long because I came out of the healthcare arena that they have equipment that can
Yeah.
get that data that you can begin to compile and look at. So as you were heading out, Doc, you said you began these two classes and then you switched
Mhm.
into cycle. When you made that switch, why did you make that switch?
Well, I think the switch occurred I mean, there's a story I tell that just I was bartending in the city, while studying neuroscience, and a friend of mine, very influential in my life, just said like, you're really good at listening and all these people keep coming back to the bar and, rather than moving abroad, why don't you get a degree in psychology? And that's when it happened. So I just
Yeah.
ended up switching in that moment and there's nothing, so went from bartending to studying psychology. There it is.
See, there's a story. There's always, and I love extracting that story. There's a couple of professions, Doc, that I tell people they're very astute in human behavior. Bartending,
Mhm.
hairstylists, any type of
Mhm.
job like that is, I have friends on both, and listening to them, sometimes I just listen and realize that these guys are pretty in depth in human behavior, mindset, and thoughts, and they don't have the degree, but they're practicing this stuff every single day, all day
Absolutely.
long.
Absolutely.
And it
Yes.
is absolutely fascinating. So yeah, here you are at the bartender. Someone makes. I love how we have. It just happened. Nothing in life just happened.
Mm.
I've learned that while I'm here on this planet. I believe that there are plans been made for us, Doc, and we are just walking into them. So when you made that switch, if you will, and you began to study psychology, what did you begin to learn about you?
Well, that's the thing about psychology. You have to learn about yourself. And so, in some ways, that was
Yeah.
actually, well, in many ways, it was terrifying. And so, I joke and say sometimes I wish I went into engineering or accounting because they don't spend the time kind of looking at yourself in the way that we do. I mean, we have to look at,
Yeah.
today's world, kind of looks at diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or implicit bias as like sexy things to talk about that are really, top of mind. But these are things that I was you know, forced to look at 20 years ago. And I say forced because it's like, as a young graduate student, I didn't want to, I don't want to look at my white
Mm-hmm.
privilege. I don't want to look at my male privilege, but, it's critical to being an effective provider. And I'm thankful that I did that for sure. So yeah, you learn in that regard, there's no profession that kind of teaches us more about ourselves.
Yeah, it is probably one of the toughest, as you said, one of the toughest things to do because you have to face you, man. You have to face
Mhm.
everything that is you. And as you begin to look into all of that, and you mentioned a few of them, you begin to question things. And that's when the deprogramming, if you will, the true deprogramming begins to happen within that individual life. As you begin to deprogram yourself from all of the systemic beliefs that one is a part of. How did
Yeah.
it start to affect your relationship with others?
It allowed for me to build, closer connections. I mean, vulnerability is something that not a lot of people practice. And so the work
Yeah.
of introspection is vulnerable. And so in order to
Hmm.
connect with people, you need to be vulnerable. And in some ways, it also allowed for me to like set boundaries and cut some people off, because you
Yeah.
recognize who's contributing, in a positive way, who we need to serve and heal and help, and who we need to just let go and let them kind of, figure their path out.
Yeah, I tell people that the beauty about like the profession that you picked, it, especially when you're studying psychology, and I had to study some of it, and what it does to the individual is help you to become the observer, where you are now observing you. And it is one of the most privileged places to be, because when you become the observer, you are now
Yeah.
beginning the journey, the deep stuff. You're looking as to why and how and cause and effect dealing, and as you state, you begin to learn a few things. You begin to learn about boundaries. Important. I tell people boundaries are there to save you, not about anyone else. And when you begin to implement boundaries in your life, there will be people that will fall apart, because those are the selfish ones that were demanding a lot of your time. And because you're not giving them that time and that attention, if you will, they will begin to buck, and that becomes a contentious relationship as a result, because you're not giving them all the time that they want. And so, yeah, it's a great place to be, because it allows you a great amount of adjustment, insights, deep work, as you hear terminology being used today, shadow work, and all these different things, as one begins to investigate yourself. And so it causes your relationship to be richer, all of these different things. So here you are, Doc. Man, what a privilege. This is a young 20-something-year-old man dancing amongst all of this stuff that he is engaging in. Most of us at that time, we were partying our asses off, man. We're not doing anything like what you're doing, to that deep level as to become an observer. Most of us are not much later on in our life. As you began to
Well,
stretch
it's, I
yourself,
just want to, I just want to
go ahead.
clarify that. I mean, I was doing both. I was doing both. So, that,
Yeah. Well, it's always part of the party, but you had something that was still making you look at something in you. We weren't looking at a damn thing. I didn't see
that's right.
anything until I was in my 30s, man. So
Yeah.
that's still a privileged position to be. So here you are, man. I'm sure you're grabbing all the data, you're seeing the cause and effect within your being. When you started to look at that, what spiritual part, because you're getting the data, the educational part. What spiritual belief system did you start to gravitate to as you're getting, quote unquote, the natural data? And now I'm sure you're going to be curious as to the spiritual aspect of that. Where did you end up, and how did that come about?
Well, I was raised Catholic, so sometimes I jokingly say I'm a recovering Catholic, but I don't really believe that because I think everything kind of impacts us and, there's no regret there. And I still would have that as my identity. And that's the beauty of like Zen or Buddhism. There's no, fancy church or like membership card. It's just something that's internal and
Yeah.
it's philosophical. And so I started studying Tibetan Buddhism first. And then when I met my now teacher, I just kind of transitioned over into the Zen world and have always blended that with psychological science. So just understanding the impact of emotion regulation, behavioral effectiveness, things of that nature.
Yeah, that's powerful, because I knew you would have eventually head there. And I
Yeah.
wanted to see which ones did you gravitate to, because as we started on the onset, that these principles have been around a pretty long time. It's just
Yeah.
now guys like you are able to look at it from different vantage point, if you will, quote unquote, apart from the spiritual side. You guys are looking at more of the educational side. And so I figured you would head into there. Also, I remember do some Zen studying. One of my friends had given me, introduced me to a book, and that also helped me understand certain things in the mindset space and so forth. As you went into to those arenas, Doc, because they are steeped now in reprogramming, understanding the minutiae of the mind, the thoughts. How did you land with your knowledge that you had gained? How did you land when you got there?
I think I'm still coming in for landing. I think that's the beauty of the practice. Enlightenment. It's in your title. In the Zen tradition, you learn that there's no such thing as enlightenment, even though it's the fourth noble truth. So even though you're
Yeah.
trying to get towards enlightenment, you realize that once you land in enlightenment, you've already taken yourself out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We use these abstract words and stuff like that to try to explain, but there is no true explanation. It's an experience that one has to be a part of. And I know psychologists are trying to make people aware of what do they call the quantum realm, or in religion, spirituality, they'll say the heavenly places. Same thing. That's where you go, and you have to get to that place in order to begin. But there's a process by which you get there. You got to let go of a lot of things. That's what the journey is about, to be able to get to those places, extract things from there. As you have began, as you said, you're still landing, and I don't think we'll ever land, Doc. I think there's no such thing as landing, basically. But as we are gathering data and you're learning and you began your new study, how did you begin to impact? How did it begin to impact your work now that you're going to learn how to marry these two together? How did that clarity, if you will, began to enter into you?
Yeah, I think it's still kind of entering, but I think the internal piece, I think it's really hard to, like, sell is the wrong word, but to be able to describe sort of the impact, like I can show like functional MRI images and be like, oh, here's, areas of your brain that are
Yeah.
changing, but that's so abstract for many people. So I think for me, with the introspection and then being able to kind of feel the internal piece, you almost get it. So one of my first teachers, Miriam Healy, she would say to me sometimes, she would say, and she was a student of, we have the same, main teacher, Robert Kennedy, Roshi. But she would say to me when I first started sitting with her, sometimes you just can't wait to get to the cushion, and that's for the meditation. And I didn't get it, because
Meditation,
I
yeah.
was like this,
Yeah.
I was like this 24-year-old, 25-year-old who was like, kind of hated it at times, I was like, ugh, I'm going to go to this place, so I didn't understand that. But I never forgot it. And I get it now, like there's that, you sort
Yeah.
of get, you really want that internal kind of peaceful feeling.
Yeah. That's where it actually, meditation for me, and I always say to people, meditation saved my life. Because at the time I thought I was in corporate America, a management position, and the pressure of the corporate world and my mind, and being a director and over all this stuff, my single dad, a lot of things was coming at me. And meditation, once I discovered meditation, it allowed me to, I tell people, I learned how to control me, first of all, and meaning my thoughts. I began to become aware of thoughts, and the power of the fluidity of thoughts is all over the place. But I learned how to pick which one I wanted to manifest and give birth. And I told people, meditation allows you to become and walk into your creativeness. I controlled my day right there in my meditation. And meditation, when I first started, Doc, you were there. Your mind, did I close the door? Where's the car keys? I feel an ant crawling on my back. I mean, all kinds of stuff. The mind and the body, which is in control at that time, the body is trying to get you out of that space, because the body knows that when you get into that space, that's where one become familiar with being present. There is no place like being in a meditation where it allows you to be present, to become aware of everything, the breath, all of things, your body mechanics, all of those things. As a young man, you said you didn't understand what your teacher was saying. When you became, I guess, when you understood, do you remember that day, Dom, when you were there, and then you understood what she was talking about? How did that feel? What translated there?
Yeah, no, I don't have like a single day, so that won't be like the best
Yeah.
story. But But certainly when you do, Zazen, and, you know, I've done up to like, 8, 9, 10 day silent retreats. Those have been the most
Hmm.
impactful where you can really like, see the benefits and start to be like, oh, that's what this is, and some of those
Yeah.
retreats, you've got a very strict schedule. And I'd find myself down there, in this sitting room earlier, and staying till the end of the night,
Oh, really? Yeah.
for extra. And part of that's my like
Yeah.
perfectionism and high achieving, but other part of that is like it just felt good, and you just know that the discomfort, because it also didn't feel good, is what's going to help me
Mhm.
grow. And so yeah, those were the moments where I was like, okay, this is what.
Yeah, it's pushing yourself. It's also gathering data. I gain a lot of insights in that space about myself, about human beings, but more so about myself that I was able to apply to human beings because we are part of the human race. I learned a lot in that space, Doc, about thoughts and the power of the thoughts and the power of creation from my thoughts. All of those
Yeah.
things I started to learn from that place of meditation. And I tell people meditation is just one of the tools that give you access to the subconscious being. There's many different ones out there. Find which one fits your being and make that and become a disciple. Once you find it, become a disciple,
Yeah.
discipline yourself. And once you discipline yourself, you will see, growth amongst yourself and so forth. So, Doc, here you are starting, you're learning all of these things. Now, as you begin to put them together, because I was reading some of your things, some of the things that you've done working in the Caribbean islands and all of different things and dealing with folks from different cultures. As you began to expand yourself and walk into different cultures, because I love dealing with cultures and having a conversation with cultures because they teach us much. When you were in some of those other places where people are saying less than, and one of the things phenomenon that I've learned, all those countries that they talk about less than, they're more happier than those that
Mhm.
have more than. What was
That's right.
your experience when you were there and exchanging data with the different cultures, and how did it affect your being?
Yeah, I mean, those are all sort of, privileged experiences, so I have to be mindful about it. One of the things I thought about, like, I had a friend who did the Peace Corps, and, not everyone can afford to take what is it, like 25 months off, and not work. But
Yeah.
those are powerful experiences, to be able to go experience a different culture. And so, yeah, I've been blessed to be able to do smaller aspects of that, both, like you said, in the Caribbean with, as well as in Africa. And those shared experiences are things that have a tremendous impact, in a very positive way, in my opinion. And so I think it's just, really blessed to have been able to do that.
Yeah, I tell people try to step out, even if you can't go to quote unquote
Yes.
outside of your country. There are many places within your country that you can go and step out of your comfort, go and serve and watch what happens to you, not what happens to them, just what happens to you. And if you allow it,
Yes.
it can become very addictive, if you will. And I want to challenge all of you guys that have tuned into this particular podcast. Step out of your comfort zone, man. Go beyond yourself. Get uncomfortable and go in a soup kitchen in a less than place
Hmm.
and help. Just give your time and you will receive much blessings for you. It will change you forever. Doc, you've done a couple of work. Talk to us about some of the studies that you've done, because those that are coming in, we know we have some of those guys that are more of a bookworm, and then we have those that are in the spiritual realm. Talk to us about this synergy that you started to learn as you study both of them and how it synchronizes. And in a sense, it's one, but just coming from different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I talk a lot about oneness. And so I think being able to bring things together is really key. When people are feeling unsettled or unwell, it's because something's not connecting. In psychology,
Hmm.
we call this value-based living, or just sort of finding, when you're not living with your values is when you start to feel like there's something that going on that needs to be fixed. And so I take inventory of that in my own life, and then certainly help people do that in their life. And that helps to bring that oneness together. So bringing all the stuff together, every listener has gifts. And so being able to kind of combine them, package them, and share them is really, that's life to me.
Yeah. I think that's the good stuff. That's living. And I've always from day one, I've invite people to become acquainted with their gift. And this is what I try to tell people. Once you become acquainted with your gift, you will use your gift. But the thing about the gift is that it will come to a point where it will begin to use you, and you have to learn. That transition will happen. You'll find yourself standing in a crowd of people doing stuff that, and you wanted to know after it's finished, how did this even begin? But the gift is, people notice it. People will see it in you, and then they'll extract it through a conversation. And then the next thing you know, you're in the midst of this conversation, and your gift is using you. And when you get there, it's a beautiful life, because you find yourself, you never know what will happen at any given moment. As you begin to marry and synchronize these two, Doc, I know you've written books. You have the Mindful Workbook. Talk to us about that, because again, I want the audience, and I'm going to provide the link for you guys to get to Doc, because this podcast is all about learning about the self, learning to work through pain, learning to work through all of the different traumas that we encounter in our life while we're here on this planet, man. And there are many, but there are ways out. And so Doc has put together a workbook that can assist you in that fashion. I want you to talk a little about your book, Mindfulness Workbook for Beginners, and introduce the listener, to that so that we can talk a little about that.
Yeah, Mindfulness Workbook for Beginners is just something I put together actually during COVID and worked with this publisher. And, it's a global way of how to practice mindfulness. When I first started doing this about 15, 20 years ago, people didn't know what it was. And today people seek us out for training or coaching in mindfulness. So this book is kind of can help if there's a listener who's sort of interested in what this word is. It's non-secular, and, it's just a way that people can do this no matter where they are in the world and whatever their belief system.
Yeah. And that's it, because a lot of people, they allow their belief system to keep them out of their blessings or what they need. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that anyone can use this book, and anyone that is in pain. I love Doc's, his focus is accepting the pain. He's teaching you guys how to accept the pain. Talk about that, Doc, about accepting pain and what happens when one does accept pain, and how can we eliminate, as you state, eliminate the suffering that is within that realm. How do we accept it?
Yeah, I mean, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. That's the saying. And that's really at the foundation of mindfulness and Zen. So we all have pain. I've worked with very privileged, high performing people. All of the people we see on TikTok or on TV have pain. And so we just have to learn how to accept and, kind of release and, not choose suffering, which, it's an art. It's an art, but it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people, suffering is a choice. We choose to suffer. Pain is totally different. And so, again, all you guys that have been listening to our conversation, and Doc has laid out some really powerful stuff for us, especially this book. I'm going to provide links for you guys to get access to him, because it's important that you come out of your pain. There's no need for you to endure any suffering as well. Pain is natural. It happens to us all. But your suffering, we want to address that. And I'm sure Doc's book will address that and allow you to have principles that will be able to move you through all of that. And we're going to get all of that so you guys can have access to him. Doc, you're in this field and you've seen much. There's much going on. As you said, people are seeking you out, if you will. What is it that you are sensing being at the front line with all of this data, all of this stuff that is happening, the pain that is out there in the world today? What is it that you are sensing as an individual that is in tune with, quote unquote, the heavenly places or in the quantum field as we expand our horizon? What is it you're sensing that you feel that is moving you to another plane?
Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer, but a thought that comes to mind is just cognitive diffusion. So what we think is not real, and coming to an understanding that in the Zen teaching is that everything is an illusion. And so, maybe this is a divine place. Maybe we're in it, but who knows?
Yeah, I tell people, since the thought field is here and we're getting a chance to dance within the thought field, Who knows? That's the same thing I told someone a few days ago. Well, Doc, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment, man. I really appreciate you sharing your time and your wisdom with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's great. It's a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.